The first time my father asked me for money after giving everything to my brother, I didn't say no. I said, "How much?" That was the problem. For 20 years, I had been answering that question. How much do you need? How much is the bill? How much is missing? How much can you lend us? And somehow, every time I answered, I became a little less visible in my own family. My name is Aylana Brooks, and for most of my life, I was the daughter everyone described as strong. People think being called strong is a compliment. Sometimes it is. But in my family, strong meant they believed I didn't need anything. My younger brother, Marcus, was different. Marcus needed encouragement. Marcus needed second chances. Marcus needed help getting started. Marcus needed someone to believe in him. And apparently, when my parents finally decided what they would leave behind, Marcus needed the entire family business. I didn't know about the decision until my mother invited me to dinner. Nothing serious, she'd said over the phone. It was serious. I knew that the moment I walked into the dining room. My father's old wooden desk had been moved beside the window. Papers were spread across the table. My mother had made coffee, even though it was nearly 8 at night. And Marcus was sitting in my father's favourite chair. He smiled when I entered. "Look who's finally here." I ignored the comment and sat down. My father cleared his throat. "We've been discussing the future." I looked at the papers. "What future?" "The future of the company." That caught my attention. My parents owned Brooks and Sons, a small construction supply company my grandfather had started decades earlier. Despite the name, I had spent years working there. Not officially at first. When I was 19, I handled invoices. At 22, I reorganized the inventory system. At 26, I negotiated with 3 suppliers after my father nearly lost a major contract. When the company struggled during a difficult year, I worked weekends without taking extra pay. I never complained, because it was family. Marcus, meanwhile, had joined the company twice, and quit twice. The third time, my father made him operations manager. He lasted 11 months. Then he started his own consulting business. It lasted for months. Still, my parents never stopped believing in him. My father folded his hands on the table. "Your mother and I have decided that Marcus will take over the company." I stared at him. Marcus looked down, pretending to be humble. "That's great," I said quietly. My father smiled. "We knew you'd understand." I almost laughed. Understand. That was another word my family used whenever they wanted me to accept something unfair. My father continued. "We've also arranged for him to have the house." The house. My childhood home. The place where my mother had marked my height against the kitchen wall. The place where my grandfather had died. The place I had helped my parents renovate. After a storm destroyed half the roof, Marcus was getting that too. I looked at my mother. And what am I getting? Silence. My mother glanced at my father. My father looked genuinely confused by the question. "You have your career." I nodded slowly. "Right." Marcus finally spoke. "Aylana, it's not personal." I looked at him. Of course not. It wasn't personal. That was exactly what made it hurt. If they had hated me, at least there would have been a reason. But they didn't hate me. They simply trusted me to survive without them. They had spent my entire childhood preparing Marcus to inherit, and me to cope. I stood up. "I think I'm going to go." My father frowned. "You aren't angry, are you?" I smiled. "No." And for once, I was telling the truth. I wasn't angry. I was finished. 3 weeks later, I received an email from my father's lawyer. The subject line read, "Transfer of business ownership." I opened it expecting paperwork. Instead, I found something that made me sit back in my chair. There was a paragraph I hadn't expected. My father hadn't simply given Marcus the company. He had given Marcus the company with its debts. Every loan, every supply obligation, every outstanding tax payment, every unresolved contract, and one particularly large bank loan that had been secured against the business property. I read the document twice. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because suddenly everything made sense. My father hadn't given Marcus a prize. He had given him responsibility. And for the first time, I wasn't responsible for rescuing him from it. 2 months passed. I heard almost nothing from my parents. That alone felt strange. Then, on a rainy Thursday morning, my phone rang. "Mom." I answered. "Hello." She didn't say hello. "Hey Lana, your brother is having problems." I looked out the window. "What kind of problems?" "The company." "What about it?" "He says the accounts aren't right." I closed my eyes. Of course they weren't. Marcus had never understood the difference between revenue and profit. He'd always believed that if money came into the company was doing well. My father had spent years correcting his mistakes. I had spent years preventing them. Now neither of us was doing it. "Mom," I said gently, "Marcus owns the company." "I know. You chose him." There was a long pause. "We didn't think he'd struggle this much." I almost smiled. "You didn't think I'd struggle either." She became quiet. Then she said something I never expected. "We thought you could handle it." There it was. The sentence that had explained my entire childhood. You can handle it. You can understand. You can wait. You can sacrifice. You can forgive. You can manage. But this time, I didn't answer. I simply said goodbye. The next morning, I received another call. This time, it was my father. His voice sounded different. Older. Tired. "I owe you an apology," he said. I didn't speak. He continued. "I thought giving Marcus the company would finally make him responsible. And did it? No." I waited. "Your brother wants to sell it." I sat down. "Then let him." "He can't." "Why?" "Because there's something you don't know." My stomach tightened. "What?" "The company isn't worth what you think it is." I stared at the wall. "What do you mean?" "There are two major contracts that could destroy us if they're cancelled." I said nothing. "And one of them," my father whispered, "was negotiated by you." I remembered the contract immediately. 3 years earlier, I had secured a long-term supply agreement with a national building company. It had saved Brooks and Sons from bankruptcy, but I had never received a bonus, never received recognition, not even a thank you. My father had simply said, "Good work." Now that contract was the only thing keeping the company alive. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Marcus wants you to come back." I laughed softly. "No." "Alana." "No, Dad." "But the company is his." Silence. Then my father said something that changed everything. "We never actually expected you to come back." I frowned. "What?" He sighed. "We thought you would eventually leave the company and build your own life." I did. "I know." "Then what's the problem?" "The problem is that we realized something too late." I waited. "You were never the employee we needed." My heart began beating faster. "You were the person who made the company work." I didn't know what to say. For years, I had wanted someone to recognize that. And now that they finally did, I discovered I didn't need their recognition anymore. I thanked him and ended the call. That evening, I opened my laptop. For months, I'd been working quietly on an idea. A company of my own. Nothing huge. Nothing flashy. Just a small procurement and logistics business. I had clients who trusted me. Suppliers who knew me. People who had worked with me for years. I had been afraid to start because some part of me still believed leaving my family's company meant abandoning my family. Now I understood the truth. You can love your family without carrying them. So I registered the business. I named it Northbridge Supply. 6 months later, it had 23 employees. 1 year later, we moved into our own building. And 2 years later, I received another phone call from my father. This time, he wasn't asking for money. He was asking if I would meet him for coffee. I agreed. We sat across from each other in a quiet cafe. He looked smaller than I remembered. "Marcus sold the company," he said. I nodded. "How is he?" "He's doing fine." That surprised me. My father smiled. He finally learned to stand on his own. I smiled. "Good." He looked at me for a long time. "I'm proud of you." Those 4 words should have meant everything. Once, they would have. But I had already spent years becoming proud of myself without hearing them. "Thank you," I said. My father reached into his coat and placed an envelope on the table. I looked at it. "What's that?" "Your grandfather's letter." I froze. My grandfather wrote me a letter. Before he died. Why didn't I get it? My father looked down. "Because he asked me to give it to you when you were ready." My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. The handwriting was unmistakably his. The letter was short. It said, "Alana, if you're reading this, you've probably spent a long time believing you have to earn your place in this family. You don't? Your brother may inherit what I built, but never confuse an inheritance with worth. A house can be inherited, A business can be inherited. Money can be inherited. Character cannot. Build something that belongs to you. And when you do, don't apologize for becoming someone they didn't expect. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it carefully. My father was watching me. I should have given you that years ago, he said. Yes. He nodded. I know. For the first time in my life, neither of us tried to soften the truth. I left the cafe that afternoon feeling strangely light. Not because my family had finally chosen me. They hadn't. Not really. They had simply realized, much too late, that I had stopped waiting to be chosen. Outside, the rain had stopped. The pavement was shining beneath the afternoon sun. I walked toward my car, holding my grandfather's letter against my chest. And I realized something. For years, I had thought my family had left me with nothing. But they had accidentally given me the one thing they could never take back. The courage to build a life without asking them for permission. And that turned out to be worth more than the house, the company, or the inheritance they had once believed I needed. I didn't need to be the heir. I needed to be the author of my own life. Subscribe and join us. Enjoying the stories? Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss a new story. Every story brings a new secret, a new twist, and an unforgettable ending. Subscribe now and become part of our story family.